Actually, I wanted to ask you, Andrew, about distribution, because you're running a very small label, pretty much self-managed acts. How does the new formats like MySpace or peer-to-peer, how is that working with your model?
Well, I guess before I hit that, I was going to address the commodification point. I think that it's not a new thing in art in general. There was a lot of talk in the early 20th century about art in the age of mechanical reproduction, when people were first inventing things like mimeograph machines. And it used to be the case you had to travel to Paris, to the Louvre, to see a Picasso. And now, all of a sudden, in the early 20th century, you can create a reproduction of that and distribute it in a newspaper or in a book. And it sort of changed the fact that it allowed art to sort of get to the masses in a way that it never had before. And I think music was just technologically limited in terms of it went to duplication on, say, vinyl, to duplication on CD, to now file compression being where you can transmit an MP3 in an email.
This would make such a great segue over to Valerie talking about artist rights and copyright law, because when you're talking about, I agree with you 100%. The file sharing in MP3, it's definitely made that
which does then lead to the artist rights and copyright issues, because there is no real way to plug the analog hole and sort of say I cannot allow this piece of digital data to be copied, or to say I must pay this artist 5 cents every time someone listens to song X from an MP3 file. There's no real, as much as you can DRM, from here till infinity, there's no real way to really plug that hole. And so the issue is, with the RIA and people sort of fighting against the end user, they've created this climate where there's so much music, there's never been more music than now, and people don't want to pay for it. Because they're not used to paying for it, in a sense. It's being bombarded with them. MySpace is nothing but free music.
Well, let's go
Before
over
you hop over, I just want to interject one real quick point to sort of insert at the beginning of Andrew's history of music. Bear in mind that art has always been tied to commerce. This is not a new thing. All great artists had patrons that funded their works, from the great masters way back in the day. So this idea that commerce and art are suddenly being thrust together is not a correct notion. Art and money have always been there together from the beginning, and artists need money to create.
There's a great quote from
Here's someone who helps them get their money.
I'm a transactional music attorney, so I don't litigate or anything like that. I just help artists to figure out what the contracts mean, things like that, and also advise them on business matters. And finding the diamonds is part of it. It being a commodity is part of it. As far as having no control over their music being everywhere, it boils down to them having to make themselves known through touring. And I got to get that book and give it to my clients because they need it.
Do you give her a discount on the bulk purchase?
But I think it boils down to you have to show people that you have better music by doing the basic thing and touring and going to their town and having people go, ooh, I feel good listening to this music, and then going to the back of the room and buying. Now they have cards that you can buy, that it's not a CD, it's a card for downloads. You can give them away, and you can give away one song, and then they go to the site, they download it, and then they can purchase the rest of your album if they like it. There's lots of ways around having it all be free, but it boils down to loyalty and people liking your music, developing your fan base. Some of my clients, they started by, on their web page, they'll give out a free MP3 for about 3 months of one song, and sort of rotate that once in a while, and they develop fans that associate with them and that feel good about them. And when they come to town, they go to their shows. And so when a CD comes out and they're like, listen, we really need your help because we're not going to be able to tour unless we sell some CDs and sell some t-shirts and stuff, tell your friends, bring your friends, and people feel like some ownership to that band. I knew them when. I feel really good about them. Let's all go to the show. Let's,
it's patronage, just diffused over a large amount of people.
Exactly.
Martin's actually got a whole chapter in his book, Chapter 11, Marketing 1, Revenue Stream. And you're making a perfect segue over into that. So we're talking about now the idea that that physical media CDs are not the source of revenue. I think that's pretty much something you guys are all agreeing on.
Not even close. Not to be a naysayer, but
okay,
here is the weekly unit sales report from the latest issue of Billboard. Albums sold just under 8 million. Digital albums sold just over 800,000.
Man.
So we're talking that.
So that's like half, right?
No, that's like 10%. Digital sales are about 10 or 11% of what albums are being sold.
Right.
And I think it's important to note that the music industry is changing, but it is not changed up. This is a going forward thing, and the change is not done. People are still buying physical format. The CD is very far from dead.
I wonder if Billboard's got a section of how many albums illegally downloaded.
Well, I mean, you're completely
or
right.
how many CDRs
80 million.
Illegally burned. So
Yeah.
I mean, what's happening illegally doesn't change the dynamic of the numbers of what's happening legally. And as people in the business, we're not really interested in marketing music to the people that aren't paying for it. We're trying to reach the people who still want to pay for it, and knowing that 90% of them are still buying it on CD is important.
I'm going to interject there. I'm interested in marketing music to anybody who'll take 1 fucking minute and listen to something they're not already familiar with, right? And that's the biggest problem facing any band or label, is having anybody give over a minute of open brain time to go, do I like this, yes or no? And that's always been the toughest thing, I think. Most of the bands I came across early on were through mixtapes, and those were all free and illegal. And so we're talking about a few different things. The legal aspect, I think it's true. I agree with everything you're saying. A band has to create their own leverage, because for me, a live appearance contract or a recording contract is useless without the baseball bat of leverage to back it up. If you're a band and you want to be victims and you don't do anything, then you will be victims and nothing will happen and it will be crap. But if you go out there and create an audience, you create leverage. You can go back in and renegotiate your contract. By building your audience, you create your own leverage, and you can use that. Without an audience base, you don't have any leverage.
The question I want to put to the panel